Hello, I'm Todd Stacy. Welcome to a special episode of Capitol Journal. We are here on location in Point Clear, Alabama, at the Grand Hotel for the Business Council of Alabama's annual Governmental Affairs Conference. Each year, the state's top political and business leaders gather here at the Grand for a series of meetings, seminars, and panels focused on various state policies, mostly those related to the state's economy and business community. It's the largest gathering of its kind when everyone from the governor, state lawmakers, the state's congressional delegation, and CEOs from Alabama's companies, large and small, are all in one place sharing ideas. BCA is the state's premier business trade association, lobbying the legislature for business-friendly policies on behalf of its member companies. They've allowed us unique access to take viewers inside this annual gathering of the state's most influential leaders. Coming up on the show, I'll be visiting with BCA President and CEO Helena Duncan, Jason Isbell, Head of State Government Affairs for Regions Bank, Congressman Mike Rogers, Congressman Dale Strong, Lieutenant Governor Will Ainsworth, House Minority Leader Anthony Daniels, and Jimmy Rane, CEO of Great Southern Wood. We'll be right back.
You can watch past episodes of Capitol Journal online at video.aptv.org. Capitol Journal episodes are also available on APTV's free mobile app. You can also connect with Capitol Journal and link to past episodes on Capitol Journal's Facebook page. And you can listen to past episodes of Capitol Journal when you're driving or on the go with Capitol Journal podcasts. Keep up with what's happening with Capitol Journal.
Here at the annual Business Council of Alabama Governmental Affairs Conference, it's been 3 days of policy meetings, panel discussions, a visit from the state's congressional delegation, and a special presentation by Governor Ivey. Here are some of the sights and sounds from this year's conference.
When I became governor in 2017, my goal was to make Alabama better by the time I left office. Well, I believe we are well on our way to achieving that. However, I, like every one of you in this room, believe in Alabama's greatest potential. So not only do I think we have a better Alabama today, we will have the best Alabama for generations to come. Our next few years will be busy, productive, and very full. And there will be no challenge too big for us to take head on. The people of Alabama deserve our very best. And future generations deserve our hardest work today. So let's work together. Let's go to work. This is our opportunity. So let's not waste a moment.
I think it's a great opportunity for relationship growth, especially when you're in a unique setting. Many people have their families, and you have a little different environment than what we have in Montgomery. And so when people can get together like that and get to know each other better, as you've heard me say before, most important thing we have is relationships, and those relationships pay huge dividends to the people of Alabama. As we work together, the more we know about each other, the more we interact with each other, the better we can work on topics that are important to the people. So an event like this gives us a chance to do that, and the Business Council and the business leadership within the state have had this conference for a long time. It's been one that I've enjoyed participating in.
With Cherry Sewell being on Ways and Means, me being on Energy Commerce, Mike chairing Armed Services, that is extremely important to the state of Alabama. And obviously losing Sessions and Shelby in the Senate, we've got a couple of very capable replacements. We're very excited about them. But a lot of the power has shifted to the House. And one of the things that never really gets talked about much is that Mike and I are both on the steering committee. That's a leadership committee. There's only 30 members. That's the committee that determines who gets on a committee and who chairs a committee. And we were able to get Jerry on appropriations, taking that spot that Martha Roby had, bringing Dale in. It was critical that we get him on Armed Services, that we get him on Homeland Security. We also got him on Natural Resources, which if Mike and I hadn't been on the steering committee, I'm not sure that would have happened. And the same thing with Barry Moore, getting him on Judiciary.
Let's encourage American companies and American investment to start drilling and start mining our natural resources. It's as simple as that. All the Chinese imports, we need to start looking at some more tariffs. If they're going to impose tariffs on American goods, let's do the same for Chinese. If they're going to supplement the Chinese manufacturing, let's look and see what we can do in America. We've got to invest in America.
I think we have a really strong economy in Alabama, as evidenced by a 2.2% unemployment rate.
Yeah.
Everywhere I go, businesses are growing. We were one of the very last states to shut down, as you know, during COVID, and one of the very first to reopen. As a result of that, we have a really strong business community in Alabama, and I think we've seen businesses continue to perform well through COVID. 2020, 2021, and 2022 were some of the best years that business had from our perspective. And I think that's a real tribute to the way we handled ourselves over that period of time.
Congratulations to the governor, all the elected leaders that are here, and those that are not able to be with us as well. We appreciate the opportunity and feel very blessed to be able to call Alabama home as our organization. It is a business-friendly climate, and that is created by principled leadership.
Sure.
We are fortunate to operate not only in this state, we have members in all 50 states, but we have 2 million of those members in Alabama.
Yeah.
And it is a privilege for us to serve each one of those members in this state, in the business-friendly climate and environment that we have.
Joining me next is Lieutenant Governor Will Ainsworth. Governor, thanks for coming on the show.
Yeah, great to be on the show. Like your new studio.
Yeah, this is our Point Clear studio. We're having a lot of fun. You know, we've never done this before, being a part of this BCA conference, but I think it's really interesting to bring viewers in because if you think about it, this is really the biggest maybe gathering of political leaders, business leaders, really in one place. And I think it's important to kind of highlight that for the state. And you've been to several of these over the years. Why do you come here? What do you like to get out of BCA?
Yeah, I mean, so I think first, obviously, networking, hearing from business owners. You know, Business Council of Alabama is the largest organization in our state advocating for businesses. So obviously, businesses are the backbone of America. They're the backbone of Alabama. So first, I come here to talk to business owners, small and large, and hear their thoughts about what we can do to continue to improve our state. Second, I usually get asked to speak. So today, I spoke about Small Business Commission, workforce development. Talked about really how great our state's doing. I mean, we've got a great story to tell right now with the amount of people that are moving here, the amount of growth we're continuing to see. It amazes me. People, even my home county of Marshall County, people moving from out of state to Alabama, right? Mm-hmm. And so we're doing a lot of things right. We want to continue to do that. And I think one of the goals of government should be to make sure we're business friendly, right? Because, when you look at it, I think it's, like we have thousands, I forget the exact number, of small businesses in our state, right, that employ so many people. And that's really the backbone of, small town America, small businesses. So what can we do to help them be successful from a government standpoint? That's one of the reasons I come to learn.
Mm-hmm. Well, about this time last year, at last year's conference, we were talking about, we were hearing a lot about, hey, we've got to reauthorize these incentives, right? Our incentive laws, because they were expiring. They're set up to sort of sunset after 5 years. So it was a big theme of last year's conference, and y'all really did that in short order. You had your commission working on some of those ideas and everything. So do you think that conferences like this play a decisive role in really focusing the attention of the legislature on, hey, this is something we've got to do?
Yeah, no doubt. I think, and certainly, the members of this organization do that as well, and just businesses. But we had to reauthorize our incentives. They would have expired in July, which would have been problematic for our state. But you look at, really proud of the work of the legislature. And if you remember also, we kind of headed up a commission last year. Not kind of, we did head up a commission, right, to reauthorize. And so one of the things I was really concerned about is sometimes people say, oh, it's corporate welfare, right? Or what type of return is the state's getting? I feel like as an elected official, it's real important for me to make sure we protect taxpayer dollars and we're getting a good return on investment. And you look at, one of the things was called Alabama Jobs Act. Over 100% return on that, right? I mean, I think it's 136% return on that to the state. So for every dollar, we're getting $1.36 back. That's huge. You look at Grow in Alabama, 91% return, right? And so when you look at that, that's how we're able to cut people's taxes, like do the grocery tax this year, right? Because we continue to grow our economy by, continue to have businesses locate here and employ people. So really proud of the work we've done on getting those reauthorized.
Well, speaking of the grocery tax, that was something that you really pushed. I mean, you really gave it a lot of momentum when you came out for it and had all the signatures and all that kind of stuff. Do you see in the future going for that full 4%? Do you think there's an appetite for that in the Senate and in the legislature?
Yeah, I think so. I think right now it's going to take off 1 cent and then do the next cent the next year, and then certainly think our goal is to eliminate the grocery tax, because people are suffering. I continue to hear that inflation's hurting people, and so we want to help, and so certainly taking that off is a goal of mine.
Well, another goal of yours, you talk about it often, is expanding 65, widening Interstate 65. Of course, we've shared on Twitter about some of these things being stuck in that Birmingham, north to Birmingham. Well, you got a little shout out the other night from former President Donald Trump. You were there. He said, "Hey, if you reelect me or elect me again, we're going to widen 65 from Mobile to Huntsville." That was a pretty good little shout out for your plan.
Yeah, no doubt. I think first I want to say this, number one infrastructure project right now, in my opinion, is I-65. We need to get that done in our state. Most popular issue I've ever worked on. I didn't know that. It's just a need I saw and have, worked to try to, raise awareness, but we need to get it addressed. I was fortunate to get to welcome the president to Alabama when he came to the Renaissance. I was it's me, Coach Tepperville, John Wall, and, was able to talk with him. And I said, Mr. President, this is something that I'd like for you to consider. He went and got a speechwriter, told me to, get with them and explain to them why we needed it, the congestion, just the amount of people we have coming to our coast every year that are tourists, and was able to meet with his speechwriter, get a wrote in the speech, and then,
wow.
Stood up for a loud applause along with a lot of other people there. So a lot of people think that was the loudest applause he got. But, here's the thing, right? I think on transportation, this is important. All right, we have to make sure that we allocate resources from DOT based on need, not on politics. All right, for too long in Alabama, we've done road projects on politics. We need to make sure we're doing stuff on need. I-10 right down here on the coast is a need. I-65 is a need. I'm going to continue to argue that, when you look at the road 43, right, is that something that's probably a good project? It is, but does it take priority over these others? In my opinion, no, it does not. And so I'm working on getting a list of projects together that I think, from talking to local mayors, senators, House members, that really are real projects, and let's get a 15, 20-year plan in Alabama and start knocking this stuff out.
Is it one of those things, though, that it's kind of easier said than done? It's a massive project. I can't imagine the kind of cost that would go into it. So if you looked into it, what kind of cost are we talking about to even if you took the bridge out, the Mobile bridge out, and you're just talking about those real critical areas of 65, what would the cost be, and do we have the tax base to even begin paying for it?
Yeah, I think we do. What you got to look at, look at 43, that's $1.3 billion that we're going to borrow. And so the question is, are we better off to take that money and put $300 or $400 million on 65 and put some towards I-10 and some up in Huntsville and some in Tuscaloosa, some in Auburn, some in Montgomery, right, where areas are growing, in Birmingham? My opinion is yes, we should do that and spread that out over projects that can have immediate need, because we have real needs right now on transportation, where areas of our state are growing, and we've got to make sure we stay ahead of the growth. And so the answer is, I'll get you a exact number on 65. I've had several different quotes, but it's certainly doable. And I'll tell you how I know it's doable. I drove through, coming back through Tennessee on the way back from a Kentucky basketball game, and they were 6-laning, 3-and-3, right, from the Kentucky line to Nashville. So other states are doing it, and certainly you can get a federal match. The other thing I understand is that it's possible in 43 is Biden's new infrastructure plan that can potentially get funded through federal funds. So why would we want to spend state money on that, right? So I think we've got to allocate resources and find out how we can get federal matches, and then start knocking them out. That's important. But 65 to me should have been done a long time ago. And the fact we don't have a plan how we're going to do that is a problem.
Well, I know you're not finished talking about this, so we'll leave it there for now. We're out of time, but thanks for coming on the show, and we'll see you through the rest of the conference.
Yeah, great to be on. Thank you.
We'll be right back.
You can watch past episodes of Capital Journal online anytime at Alabama Public Television's website, aptv.org. Click on the Online Video tab on the main page. You can also connect with Capital Journal and link to past episodes on Capital Journal's Facebook page.
Joining me next is State Representative Anthony Daniels, Minority Leader for the Alabama House of Representatives. Mr. Leader, thanks for coming on Capital Journal.
Well, thank you for having me, Todd. Always good to be with you.
In our unique location this week, it's interesting. We've never done this before, being a part of the BCA conference. So let me ask you, you've been to several of these over the years. What do you hope to get out of this year's Governmental Affairs Conference?
Well, I'll tell you, this is always one of the more interesting conferences because they get into the real nuts and bolts on issues as it relates to business, the economy. Having a conference with business leaders, community leaders, in general, all in the same place at the same time, to have real discussions so that it can really help us put things in perspective. And then you have the federal delegation that's here kind of giving us a federal overview of what's going on at the federal level. And then tomorrow, some of our state most prominent executives like Jimmy Rane and others will be doing a panel to talk through on the business side. So it's a very unique conference, a very exciting conference, and a very family-friendly conference.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, actually, we're going to have Mr. Raine here later in the show, so we're looking forward to that conversation. Look into issues, and they're talking about it here at the conference. You're hearing more conversation about barriers to the workforce. We've got a really low unemployment rate, historically low. We also have a very low workforce participation rate. Only 57.4%, I think was the last one. That's really low, and it's really low nationally. One issue I've heard talked about is childcare. I know you've been a part of legislation on this, trying to offer incentives for companies to make it easier for them to have childcare. Do you think that's going to be coming back up when y'all meet next session?
Absolutely, and since the session, there have been a tremendous amount of conversations around it from the workforce, even the school system. What we're finding is it solves a number of problems. Right now, we're wanting to make certain that our young people are prepared for the K-12 system, making certain that they have a very strong foundation that will improve our competitiveness long term, while at the same time making certain that parents are able to go back into the workforce. Because sometimes when you look at the cost of childcare currently and you look at the number of hours that you're working and you're looking at your pay, and at the end of the day you're making a decision to choose between working and childcare, but oftentimes families are staying at home with their children until they reach school age. And we want to make certain that they have an opportunity to be able to go back into the workforce and provide for their families, and give businesses an opportunity to get engaged in the workforce conversation, the child care conversation, contracting providers into their facilities to be able to teach that rich curriculum to prepare those young people, while at the same time being able to respond to the call of hiring more people and being more flexible.
Mm-hmm. You had a bill this last session. It was one of the most high-profile bills of the session. I know it made this business community pretty happy. Eliminating overtime income tax from the state. Passed overwhelmingly, I think unanimously. I wanted to ask you, how's it going with implementation? I guess January it goes into effect. Are you pleased so far with the Department of Revenue implementing that to make it actually work?
Let me tell you, you couldn't have a better partner than Vernon Burnett. He's been tremendous, even during the process of the legislative process, to kind of help me understand from their department's point of view of the implementation and how this will play out and the data that will be collected. And so, the executive branch has been tremendous. The implementation, we did a panel on the implementation of the overtime bill for January, where he's out educating employers on how to take advantage of it. He's meeting with the companies that are the payroll service companies to make certain that the back end, they're prepared for it as well. And so it's going to be a tremendous opportunity for the workforce in Alabama. It's going to help us recruit, retain, And like you said before, it's going to increase the participation rate, which expands our tax base as a state in Alabama.
Are we the first? Has any other state done something similar?
No other state has ever even had a conversation about it. Oftentimes you hear about ideas and you see pieces of legislation being introduced, but there's no state that have ever passed this piece of legislation. We're the first to do it. There are other states that are calling us about doing something similar because it incentivizes the productivity, increases productivity for industries to be able to have their goods and services produced at or ahead of schedule with an experienced workforce, while at the same time it expands their opportunity to recruit more people to the workforce because they're getting 5% back on the overtime.
Mm-hmm. It's so rare to find an issue that both labor and management are really happy about, on the same page. It's really interesting. I wanted to ask you about Space Command. We've been talking about this for weeks now, ever since the president's decision to not follow through with the previous administration's plan to base it permanently in Huntsville. Very disappointing, obviously, for Huntsville and for the state. But I wanted to ask your perspective, since you represent Huntsville. You've seen this issue develop over time. What was your perspective?
Well, my first thought, Todd, to be honest with you, I was at how the world that we lose Space Command to Lauren Boebert. Someone that's practically a very, models herself off of being, extremely highly partisan. And so for me, but I will tell you this, I think our delegation probably did all that they could do, our congressional delegation, to try to land Space Command. We do understand that politics have consequences. I think that, if Richard Shelby was in office and the statesman that he was, there's no way we would have lost Space Command. And I think that our Senator, Britt, she's done a phenomenal job staying out of the political spotlight and dealing with issues that doesn't bring, the bacon home. And so we appreciate her efforts. But I think that our other senator Senator Tuberville can kind of learn a little bit from how Dick Shelby operated, because at the end of the day, we've lost over $300 million in appropriations for the state of Alabama, and that's something that we got to refocus our attention on the earmarks. We've lost a lot of money on the earmarks, and so we just got to get back to where we were. But look for the next opportunity, right? There's conversations about the FBI and other opportunities long term, and I think we just have to be ready for that. But at the end of the day, we got to play ball at a varsity level, and right now we're playing at the junior varsity level.
I guess it's probably going to take Senator Britt a little while to get that same kind of seniority that her predecessor had. But look, we're out of time, and we'll see you around the conference. But thanks again for coming and sitting down and interviewing for the show.
Well, it's always good to have you, man, and thank you, and thank your viewers for keeping up to date with what's going on in Alabama.
All right. Thank you. We'll be right back.
The Mobile-Tensaw Delta, or simply the Delta, is located directly north of Alabama's Mobile Bay. This vast region of wetlands and Broad River Valley begins northward to the confluence of the Tombigbee and Alabama rivers. This region is home to some of the most diverse wildlife in Alabama and indeed in the entire United States. The Delta is Alabama's principal remaining natural terrain and has been designated a National Natural Landmark.
You're watching Alabama Public Television.
Joining me next is Congressman Dale Strong of Alabama's 5th District and Congressman Mike Rogers of Alabama's 3rd District. Gentlemen, thanks for coming on Capitol Journal.
Glad to be with you.
So you just finished your panel discussion here at the Business Council of Alabama Governmental Affairs Conference. Talk about what message you really wanted to convey to this crowd of business leaders, but also state political leaders. I'll start with you.
Well, we just wanted to give them an update on what's going on in Washington, so we really responded more to questions on topics than we did bring a message.
Mm-hmm. Well, of course, the topic of Space Command came up. This has been a disappointing decision coming down from Washington for the entire delegation. I imagine, in particular, locally there in Huntsville. What has been the the local reaction there in your district?
Well, I think disappointment is probably the biggest, but I'll tell you this process isn't over. The big thing I can tell you is we want what's best for national security. No matter what happens, we want to be sure that we do what's right. It's obvious with the 21 category process that we've gone through twice already. It shows that Redstone Arsenal is the #1 place to provide this service, the place to host Space Command, and so we're going to continue to advocate. I don't think the process is over yet, and it's time to bring some folks in and ask some more questions why they selected the 5th most qualified for this this command.
In the wake of the decision, you had some pretty strong words, and as chairman of the House Armed Services Committee, saying this is not going to Colorado Springs. Walk us through what kind of recourse y'all have as a delegation, we have as a state.
And that was the basic message I brought to the audience today, was just to get them to pause and just think through what really is going on here. You know, just because the president announces something doesn't make it so. And I used the example of the president announcing debt relief of $10,000 per student for anybody who had student loan debt in America. And as you saw, that didn't happen. President Trump announced 3 years ago Space Command would come into Huntsville. That hasn't happened yet. So we don't live in a monarchy. Pronunciations are pronouncements by the president doesn't mean it's going to be so. We have 3 branches of government, equal branches. When the president announced that he was going to do all this debt relief, the Supreme Court informed him, you don't have the authority to do that. We're going to inform him as the legislative branch that he didn't have the authority to do what he's done with Space Command. And let me explain the background on this. The U.S. Department of Defense is governed by Title 10 of the U.S. Code. Title 10 very specifically states that the service secretary of each department has the sole authority to decide basing locations. So for example, if you're talking about the Army, basing selections, it's the Secretary of the Army that has the final say-so. Not the Secretary of Defense, not the President, Secretary of the Army. If you're in the Department of the Navy, where they've got the Navy and the Marines, the Secretary of the Navy has that. And then whether you're talking about Air Force or Space Force, they're both in the Department of the Air Force, so the Secretary of the Air Force has that statutory authority. Well, as you know, the last Secretary of the Air Force under Trump, Barbara Barrett, went through 2 competitions. Alabama won both, and she statutorily exercised her authority and informed President Trump that she had selected Redstone Arsenal. President Trump, and as only he can do, took credit for it because
I remember the big ceremony. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, he went on Rick and Bubba and said, "Oh, I sent it to Alabama." Well, he did after the secretary picked Alabama. Okay. And that's a big point to make here, because now the Biden secretary has picked Alabama, and Biden did what he actually accused Trump of doing, and that is interfering in picking another state.
Which makes it seem very political, right?
And which is what it is. But what I want people to understand is it's not lawful. They made this announcement right after we left town, thinking it would just go away. It's not going to go away. But I was in Europe when I got the call from Secretary of Defense informing me of this. I just got back this week. There have been a lot of intense conversations going on, and I'm going to give the president the chance to correct this and do the right thing. But if he doesn't, this fall we will start hearings and point out the inappropriateness of this, and it could get ugly. But it doesn't need to do that. The fact is, and I do want your listeners to know this, that assuming everything goes wrong and the president just won't work and clean this up, everything in Colorado Springs that houses the Space Command, U.S. Space Command, which was just stood up under Trump, is in temporary facilities, leased facilities. In order to extend those leases or to replace them with new buildings, it takes a National Defense Authorization Act, authorizing language, and an appropriations bill. Mm-hmm. I have put a hold on any new leases or authorized MILCON in Colorado Springs. Robert Adderholt has put a hold on any MILCON or new leases in Colorado Springs. So for the next 16 months of this presidency, if he won't correct this, we will make sure that there's no permanent infrastructure put in place in Colorado Springs.
Well, it's interesting you mentioned facilities, because the president and his justification for some of this was, hey, it's there anyway, right? It's right now temporarily in Colorado Springs, and I kept hearing about that community really trying to build up their infrastructure and everything sort of during this interim time. Do you think that was a factor? And does Huntsville and Redstone need to do anything to kind of catch up with that?
I don't believe that they do. I think that this process clearly showed that Redstone was the best possibility where it needs to be. The thing that you watched, and even their language, the Secretary of the Air Force in this process, it said that 1 and 2 were close. 1 was Redstone, 2 was Nebraska, and then there was a large separation between 2 and 3. Can you imagine what the separation is between 2 and 5? So that's the thing. Colorado is not perfectly positioned. It was always to be a temporary location, and what we're going to do is just continue to expose this and be sure that we do what's right for national security.
Yeah, and Todd, you make a good point. Before the president made his announcement, I had announced an investigation into what you just cited, and that is there has been an 18-month delay from the time the Inspector General and the GAO came out and said Trump had nothing to do with the selection process. It was all legitimate and should move forward, until they had made an announcement. In that interim, we found out that they had been spending huge amounts of money in Colorado Springs to try to build up that temporary infrastructure to give it more capability. That was not authorized, and it was not appropriated. So I'd already started an investigation on that.
So this was federal money being spent?
Absolutely.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Without authorization and without appropriations approved for that. So we were already working on that investigation before this happened. That investigation is going to continue separate and apart from what I just described about the president's announcement here.
Yeah. Well, I know a lot of people are really anxious to see this process play out, but it sounds like it's going to take a little while.
It may not. I literally have had some very intense conversations this week with the Secretary of Defense and the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs and some other folks. I'm not going to get into all the moving parts that are going on right now, because I do want the President to recognize this was an error in judgment. When he announced that he was not going to take the Secretary of the Air Force's recommendation and instead send it to Colorado Springs, or announce Colorado Springs, he cited this as this basis, that according to the combatant commander at U.S. Space Command, this would cause an interruption in operational readiness. Well, obviously, the Secretary of the Air Force talked to that combatant commander and took that into consideration before announcing Huntsville. But the fact is that all operational readiness with regard to the space operations occur in the Space Operations Center in Colorado Springs, which is not being moved. It is going to stay there. Where you move the headquarters facilities has absolutely nothing to do with that. And what I've told the Secretary of Defense and I've told the Chairman to communicate to the President is, if he doubts me, call the Chief of Space Operations or the Commander of Space Operations Center and ask them, would moving the headquarters affect operation? And it will not. So the whole premise of him superseding or usurping the authority of the Secretary of the Air Force is false. Demonstrably false. And I want the President to have a chance to clean this up and say, I got bad information. I know he's doing it for political reasons. I got bad information. I'm going to do what the Secretary of the Air Force says and let this go away. If he doesn't, this fall it's going to get ugly.
Well, let's quickly talk about NDAA. I've got the Chairman of House Armed Services and one of the newest members of House Armed Services. So, kind of some different perspectives on there. But I know it was a slog getting that bill to the floor, through committee to the floor, and all those amendments and everything. What does the prospect look like for NDAA working with the Senate? Are we going to have a product?
Excellent. Yeah, the hard part was getting through that House vote because our leadership was determined for it to be a party line vote based on some extraneous efforts. But now that we've got through that, the House and the Senate, we see it exactly the same way. We're going to come back with a conference report that will get overwhelming support in both houses.
You look at it, I think it comes back to leadership. We're fortunate to have the chairman of House Armed Services, Mike Rogers, right here from Alabama, but he did some heavy lifting during this process. The trust that he has throughout the United States House of Representatives is unbelievable, and that he has led this committee in unique fashion. The 21 years of service have truly paid off, not only for our country, but also for the state of Alabama.
Wow. Well, we'll have to leave it there. We're out of time. Gentlemen, thanks so much for coming on the show, and we'll look forward to seeing you again.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We'll be right back.
You can watch past episodes of Capital Journal online at video.aptv.org. Capital Journal episodes are also available on APTV's free mobile app. You can also connect with Capital Journal and link to past episodes on Capital Journal's Facebook page. And you can listen to past episodes of Capital Journal when you're driving or on the go with Capital Journal podcasts.
Joining me next is Jimmy Rane, founder and CEO of Great Southern Wood. Mr. Rane, thanks for coming on Capital Journal.
Thank you. Nice to be here, Todd. Appreciate you asking me.
Well, I really enjoyed your comments during the CEO roundtable, candid comments about electing serious people. The phrase was garbage in, garbage out, about what leaders, the importance of sending serious leaders to places like Congress and the legislature. Why did you feel like that was such an important message?
Well, my good friend Pat Dye used to always say, plain talk is seldom misunderstood. So that's why it's a serious business of sending somebody to run our government.
Sure.
And we need to be serious about that, and we need to be involved. It affects every single one of us. And while I served as a county judge for 5 years, I can tell you that public service is difficult. It is very difficult. And it's a great sacrifice to the person that does it and to his family. And so you need somebody who is very committed and intelligent, somber, is going to be very conscientious about the decisions that they make and do what they can to help the state or the country prosper. So it's an important thing.
Sure. And so we're here at BCA, the conference. It's kind of the intersection of business and politics, right? And we've spoken to a lot of politicians, officials here at the table. But you are the embodiment of the business community. One of Alabama's most recognizable brands and companies. But you've been in business for decades. I read that it's in 12 states now, so you've seen different governments, different leaders and everything. I imagine you've seen some good ones and some not so good ones. Talk about the importance of forming those relationships and the difference between a business-friendly government and maybe one that's not so business-friendly.
Well, you're correct. We have facilities in 12 states, but we operate in 30.
Okay.
So we're interacting with leadership in 30 states. And I can promise you we see a big difference. Fortunately, for the most part, Alabama is very fortunate in that the leadership we have elected, for the most part, have been very high quality, dedicated, devoted people who are there for the right reasons. But that is not true everywhere.
Yeah, I imagine so. You mentioned industrial development sites, and this past year in the legislature, they passed what was called the SEEDS Act about really helping local governments, whether it's a county or city or an industrial board, help them develop their sites to attract industry. But you see it from not necessarily the state perspective, but a business perspective of you're looking at sites. So talk about how important it is for the state and local governments to develop their potential industry sites for those businesses looking.
Well, we can equate it to a business seeing a market. They see demand developing for what they're selling. So maybe today they were selling 50 widgets, but they had demand for more than 50. So how do they get more? Well, that's what's happening right now with manufacturing companies moving their manufacturing sites from overseas back to the United States. So there's a market. There's a demand for space for these businesses who want to come home. And the states that are going to get these businesses are going to be the ones that have the sites ready for them to go to work, because it's like anything in business, you have to strike while the iron is hot. So having the site and being able to show it to a business or a manufacturer and say, here we have this and it's ready to go, you can go to work tomorrow. It's very important.
Sure. The last time I saw you, it was actually a couple years ago. It was during the opening of the sawmill. And it just struck me. I ended up writing about it because just the looks on the faces of those individuals who were the first to be hired there at the sawmill in Abbeville, and the testimonials about, I guess that was the old pepperell mill, right, bringing it back to life and what that meant for the community, folks having jobs and what that, really just revitalizing the community. Talk about the importance of that and why it was so important, not just for that sawmill, but all you've done in Abbeville and why you chose to really double down in your hometown.
Well, because it is my hometown. And I love Abbeville. I was born and raised there, and have great memories. I went to school there. My school teachers, my Sunday school teachers, my friends and neighbors, and my father helped bring pepperell there in 1950.
You told that story about the spaghetti supper, right?
Yeah, right. And they came to town with 25 workers, and that plant grew to over 1,400. And it was the absolute backbone, lifeblood of our community. You can imagine how many local citizens were working there. For the first time ever, people came off of the farm and had a job. Certainly the wives who had always just been at home working on the farm. It revolutionized the town. And when they passed NAFTA and we lost it, 1,400 and something jobs, equivalent to a bomb going off in Abbeville, and a massive decline. If you had ridden through Abbeville, Alabama in 1994, you would have locked your doors and kept going. Burned out buildings, broken sidewalks, no tree. It was horrible. And my parents were upset. Every night I'd go by and I said, I don't know what I'm going to do, but I'm going to do something. And so we started. And now, when you ride through there, it is a lovely little town. And we brought that business back to life with the sawmill. We now have 130 people out there. Average wage is over $22 an hour. So yes, it is revitalized, and it is a perfect example of what I'm talking about, how we can revitalize our communities with good paying jobs. And it's very important.
Sure. Well, while I have you, I have to ask you about, we have to talk about the documentary, Mighty. It's coming out September 25th, I believe, and we'll be sure to update people. But it's this documentary about Pat Dye, who you referenced, a good friend. I know you're underwriting this documentary. We really appreciate that on behalf of Alabama Public Television. But talk about how this sort of developed and the story that it tells.
Well, Pat Dye was a very important figure in my life. I say all the time, the person that I respected the most was my father. But Pat and I formed a relationship way back when he was first at Alabama. And I was a coach, a high school coach, and I coached Pee Wee, junior varsity, and some varsity.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, 22 years. And we had a player in Abbeville, Leroy Cook. First time the boy ever put a football uniform on was for me in the 8th grade. And he turned out to be a great football player. And in his high school years, he was being recruited by everybody, Alabama, Auburn. And so Pat came down recruiting him for Bear. And that's where we met, because he is odd. When he was a senior in high school, he was married, and his secretary worked for me. And so I was urging him to go to Auburn, but Pat was more persuasive. And we became friends. And when Pat came back to Auburn in '81, we renewed our friendship, and we became very, very close friends. And we both did a lot of things together on and off the field, and went through some tough times, not athletically, but personally together. And he wound up on my board and served on my board for 26 years until he passed away. But I knew the soul of the man. I knew who he was. And when he passed away, I wanted his story to be told. So we spent 2 years making that film. And I'm really proud of it.
Well, we are eager to run it again. It's going to air in September. We'll be doing a lot of promos leading up to it. But thank you for coming on the show and sharing, and we look forward to the documentary. And thank you again for your comments today about serious government, electing serious people to the government. I think it was a message that needed to be heard.
Thank you very much. It's my honor to be with you.
All right.
Appreciate what you do, Todd.
Thank you. We'll be right back.
You can watch past episodes of Capitol Journal online anytime at Alabama Public Television's website, aptv.org. Click on the Online Video tab on the main page. You can also connect with Capitol Journal and link to past episodes on Capitol Journal's Facebook page.
Joining me next is Helena Duncan, President and CEO of the Business Council of Alabama, and Jason Isbell, Head of State Government Affairs for Regions Bank. Thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you, Todd.
Well, I got to say thank you for having us here at BCA. This is a first for us. We've really enjoyed being at the conference and being able to share with our viewers what goes on here. It's really the premier gathering of political leaders and business leaders for the whole state. And so thank you for allowing us access. And did I hear you say it's the largest ever?
Is. So you picked the right one to attend.
Okay.
For it to be your first one. We hope you come back. But yes, this is our largest one in BCA's history. Over 650 attendees registered to come to this event.
Well, so you're kind of finished now. Finally, it's been quite a. Are you pleased with not just the turnout, but a pretty ambitious program?
No, we are. We spend quite a bit of time. It is a thought process to this, and obviously you cannot have an event like we put on over this weekend and not a lot of thought and planning and preparation that happens. We decided what we thought the message should be this year, and we start from that point. And so everyone that you saw participate was very generous with their time, never a question as to whether they would do it. It was a matter if they could do it, because all of us in that room, including those that were watching the panels this morning, have just one goal, and that's how do we advance Alabama forward? How do we continue to create jobs and work towards getting a stronger workforce, and those things that are important to each and every one of us. So I feel like our mission was complete. I felt like people heard from the employers, they heard from the employees, they heard from the legislators, they heard from pollsters. So I felt like they had a complete view of Alabama and what's happening in the United States.
Mm-hmm. And Jason, you led that panel discussion on the pollsters, which everybody was really eager to see. But it was a reminder to me that as much policy was discussed this weekend, there's also a political side.
Sure.
And I know that BCA plays aggressively in the political landscape. Talk about that, because I know you're a part of Progress PAC and the political side. Talk about what goes into deciding what candidates to support and how to financially support them.
Well, you're exactly right about the importance of politics. I mean, policy and the substantive discussions that we have at this conference are critically important. But that room has as many elected officials as the State House on a legislative day. There's members of the cabinet, the judiciary, the legislature, constitutional officers, federal delegation members. So obviously talking about politics is a good thing to add to the agenda. And we had really two national experts in Republican and Democratic politics that were talking about what they see, mostly for the presidential election and the national landscape. Mm-hmm. But when it comes to Progress PAC and what the Business Council does in Montgomery and here in Alabama, truly it's a very rigorous process. Progress PAC has regional advisory groups all over the state, and they're really the first line of trying to vet and evaluate candidates for office. It's no automatic that BCA is going to endorse a candidate just because maybe they're an incumbent running for re-election. It's no automatic that BCA is going to endorse a candidate even if they're the only one in the race. There truly is a rigorous system of interviews that they have to go through. Progress PAC, for example, had a very lengthy interview session with some of the judicial candidates on the ballot in 2024 yesterday morning. And there were folks that really came from all over the state just to have 5 to 10 minutes in front of the 40 or 50 members of Progress PAC that were there. Really some hard-hitting questions, but I think that contributes to better candidates that understand the importance of pro-business policies, whether they're going to be sitting on the bench or sitting in the legislature. They understand that really BCA is the state's loudest and best voice for championing business issues. And so it's important to us that they're involved, and I think you'll see by the number of folks that are here, it's important to them too.
Mm-hmm. Helena, I noticed after the session, or kind of in the wake of the session, there were all these billboards popping up, and then and a lot of social media and everything, but y'all were kind of bragging on certain members of the legislature. I think it was related to the game plan, and I guess is that kind of a thank you to certain people that were supportive of the agenda? What went into this campaign?
So it ties into what Jason was just talking about. It starts there. We focus on trying to help elect pro-jobs, pro-economic growth candidates for these positions. And so through the game plan and throughout the whole session, we had a group of legislators that really went over and beyond expectations for the business community. And we call them our job champions because they are literally working around the clock and they're thinking about it in every decision that they make. And we just wanted to acknowledge them and let their constituents understand that they are here in Montgomery doing exactly what you sent them here to do, which is protect jobs and help grow the economy and help move Alabama forward. And so they're doing that, and we want to support that. And we want people to understand that that's who they are. We gave Governor Ivey this morning a shovel for being a job champion. And that was important to us too, because to have a governor in our state that gets it, that understand the importance of the business community, and it helps us in our job, being that we are the umbrella for all businesses, but it just helps us to just say thank you for being a job champion, to help us to fulfill our mission to the business community. There's not a time that we pick up the phone and call these folks that they don't answer. So that was just our opportunity to say thank you.
Mm-hmm. We were just talking with Jimmy Rane, who had some really interesting words for this unique crowd, right? Sure. And somebody of his, gravitas, I guess, has the ability to challenge the state's most powerful leaders in business, talking about, look, it's important who we elect. It's important to elect serious people. Talk about the feeling that was in that room when those kind of serious words were spoken, again, to the state's most powerful and influential people.
Sure. Jimmy Rane is a giver. And he takes very little. So when he speaks, people listen. And I've had the privilege of being his friend for years. And as I mentioned today on the panel, sitting on the sideline, watching him grow his business over the years to be who he is today, which is a thing all by itself, right? And so, but just for them to hear his take on why he is doing business in Alabama and other states, really should bring home to what we need to do. He's not saying go do this, he's saying count me in, right? And everybody on that stage was saying that today. They weren't just barking orders. Look at what Jeff Peoples said Alabama Power is doing. Look at the concessions that Tim Vine noted on healthcare. When we talk about the financial industry, what Regions is doing through assisting Black-owned businesses and other things. Everybody on that stage had some concessions that they were making to help our economy, to create jobs, to help with workforce development, all of those things. They're saying, count me in, coach. I want to be a part of this team. And so that's what makes the biggest difference. And looking around that room, it was just, people were just in awe because everyone could have turned their back and just proceeded on with their own business. And life would have been okay, but not for Alabama. And so that's what we hoped that people took away, that these folks are very interested on doing things outside of their own little bubble to do what their part of making Alabama great.
Mm-hmm. Well, I have to say, congratulations on an excellent conference. It is telling that so many people are actually in the room, participating in the panels and all this, not sitting out and going to the pool or whatever. And so it really was, and it's engaging. So congratulations, and thanks again for letting us be a part of it. And thanks again for coming on the show.
Yeah, thank you for having us. Thanks. Yes.
We'll be right back.
Fort Morgan, named after Revolutionary War hero General Daniel Morgan, is located in Baldwin County at the mouth of the Mobile Bay. Fort Morgan and its counterpart, Fort Gaines, located on the opposite side of the Mobile Channel, were built by the federal government to protect the U.S. coastline. In 1861, at the beginning of the Civil War, the Alabama State Militia seized Fort Morgan from the federal government, and it remained under Confederate control until Union forces retook it in the Battle of Mobile Bay in August 1864. During the World War I era, Fort Morgan was used as a training facility. The War Department declared Morgan obsolete in 1923 and sold it to the state of Alabama, but activated it again briefly during World War II to counter the German U-boat threat in the Gulf of Mexico. Now a National Historical Landmark operated by the Alabama Historical Commission, Fort Morgan offers several annual events and living history programs.
That's our show for this week. Thanks for watching. We'll be back next week at our regular time, right here on Alabama Public Television. For our Capitol Journal team, I'm Todd Stacy. We'll see you next time.